And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I am Michael DeLon. Today I'm talking with Dave Chrysler. Dave, thank you, sir, for spending a few minutes with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Michael. Excited to be here with you.
Well, you are welcome. It is going to be a really fun conversation. So, Dave and I met a few weeks ago through a mutual friend of ours, and just we had a little conversation and really struck up a friendship. And I said, "Man, we need to share your expertise with my audience." And so he's here talking about. I mean, Dave helps businesses and organizations really. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to tease them, Dave. I'm going to let you tell them what we do because we're talking about positively impacting cash flow and culture. And there's so much that can be talked about there, but we'll get into that. Tell me, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so I kind of saw firsthand what that was all about and the hard work that went into it and kind of being pulled in all these different directions as you're trying to grow, really something from nothing. And I spent the majority of my professional career working for a really large company that acquired a bunch of those really small family owned businesses. So I kind of grew into being one of the, what I call lovingly call as one of the transition people. And what that really meant was as that company was acquiring these businesses, part of my responsibility was to go into these organizations, kind of, figure out what we were doing really well, figuring out where some of those pain points were and what we were struggling with, and ultimately pull the right lever in the right order, by the way, to positively impact cash flow and profitability, company culture along the way, but really in an effort to deliver value back to the shareholders. That was my primary responsibility. So as I tell that story, I got a lot of practice doing those types of activities for different types of companies.
Yeah, you were always that guy that everybody loved seeing come in, weren't you?
Sometimes more than others.
Well, that but that experience, springboards into what you do now because business owners and in organizations they have those same problems, right? They need somebody with an outside perspective and some runway behind them, I think, to be able to come in and work with them um, to bring more value to their stakeholders, which are themselves and their employees and things. Talk a little bit about let's talk about first of all kind of what you do, and then we'll talk about what's going on with the people who you work with. So what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean at a high level, right? We're talking about business systems. And for a lot of people, systems kind of mean different things, right? Some people look at systems and say, immediate thought is technology.
Mm,
And for other people that kind of means, the process within those business systems. And for me it kind of breaks out into four main pillars. It's planning, people, process, and technology. And so, how do we kind of leverage those four key pillars in an effort to kind of move us forward, right? So, you alluded to what are some of the things that people are feeling or seeing, as they're unpacking this. And what I like to say is, you know, we don't know what we don't know, right? So if we've never experienced this before, we may feel the symptoms, we may be able to see the symptoms. In a lot of cases, that's what I hear. Dave, I know we've got an issue with our efficiency, or we've got an issue with our product quality. What I don't know is where exactly do I start to be able to pull the right lever to move the needle to solve this issue. It's where do I start and what do I actually do to do that? Because there's a never ending plethora of choices when it comes to frameworks and, technology and, consultants and books you can read, right? So there's a never ending litany of options. And how that ties back to the you don't know what you don't know is if you've never solved this problem before and you've always just treated the symptoms, it becomes very challenging to understand what will really move the needle versus what am I kind of just placating to and what am I ultimately going to end up dealing with again in another handful of months
yeah,
or, down the road.
yeah, and that's really good because I think a lot of business owners end up in that cycle of, well, dare I say fixing it? They're not fixing it. They're band-aiding
Yeah.
something. It might get better for a little bit, but then it comes back with a vengeance. And what you're able to do with your runway of experience and things is probably come alongside of them, I guess, understand their business, really diagnose to say, all right, is that really the issue? Right? Is that the right lever? Or before we pull that one, we better pull these other two first, especially when it comes to people, right?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of dynamics there. Is that kind of how you work with business owners? Is understanding what they're up against and not necessarily taking them at face value?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because again, it gets back to if you've never unpacked what the underlying root cause of that issue is, you're going to constantly be, treating the symptoms. So, yeah, part of our process is to kind of walk alongside the owner or the ops leader, kind of whomever we're starting to interface with, and obviously understand it from their perspective. But then we also like to bring in other key stakeholders, right? So that could be people that are out on the floor, that could be people kind of, closest and adjacent to those process flows that we're talking about. And generally amongst multiple people, those kind of conversations and thought-provoking questions tend to pull out the underlying truth. And yeah, again, because I've had a lot of experience, and not just theory, right? I've been on the ground. I've had bandages on my knees, and made some bruises along the way. And because of that, right? Not saying that I have all the answers, but I have a lot of experience, practical experience that kind of helps me unpack, where to start. And again, thankfully, I've had some success coming out of that, both in my professional career prior to being a consultant, and now as an independent consultant. So
Yeah, and it's really good because I always try to read between the lines and listen for what you're not saying. And I look back at your three P's and a T. Planning, people, process, technology. Um, we'd have to work on that if you went into preaching, man. You got to have 4 P's. um, but it's the I assume the planning is the planning of what change is going to need to be made, right? What people are going to be involved, what processes may or may not be working, and things about. And then, do we need technology? Is that the problem, or is there something else? And having that high level view where you and the business owner are probably looking down on this and going, okay, here's what's going on. Is that kind of what you do?
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to frame it. So you could take it a couple of different ways. Every kind of system within our business has that subset of those four pillars, right? So from a planning perspective, yeah, we're taking a look at is this kind of the most appropriate way to tackle this? Are we looking at something from a strategic planning perspective, or is this something a bit more on the tactical side? In either case, right, you need that planning pillar to understand what are we even trying to do here, right? Like, and oh, by the way, are we actually moving towards what we're doing, or are we moving further away from that, right? So having that piece in place, understanding what are we even really trying to do. The people side of it, 100%. It's the people closest to, it's the people adjacent. Depending on the size of your organization, that could be, kind of up and down the leadership ladder. So bringing together the people that kind of understand what are we trying to do. I kind of use this phrase, right? Like, as leaders, our responsibility is to set the direction, set the goal, set the bounds, but then provide the tools, right? So bringing together the people to understand how can we do that part. And then the process and technology, that's where it really comes together, right? Like, we can't execute something if we don't have a process in play. And processes are developed through planning and people, and then sometimes we leverage technology to execute those process flows, or to maintain quality around our people and process, right? But too often people kind of think, systems, technology. Oh, yeah, we're fully systemized. We've got a CRM and an ERP. It's like, well, that's not quite the same thing, because you can have a piece of technology in place, but you can have poorly defined process. You could have people in the wrong seat on the bus. You have people that don't understand what processes they're supposed to be executing, right? And then all of that will then bubble up into that planning, especially from a strategic perspective, to talk about, like, hey, are we actually moving the needle here? Or are we just, treading water, and we're hoping, that we see positive results next month?
Yeah. Well, and there's so much again that you didn't say in that the people aspect you because we talked about impacting culture. And I've seen too many companies and organizations make changes to maybe the process that they're doing or the direction they're heading and they don't communicate to the team very well and there starts to be this us versus them and the culture starts deteriorating and now you're into a whole different ball game, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, culture is the result, right? It's the scorecard, okay? And people say, hey, I want to build a tremendous culture. I want to attract really amazing people. Well, you do that through all of these other types of activities, having a clear vision, providing the bounds, removing roadblocks, letting people understand what's their role, what does success look like to them, right? For them in your eyes, right? And then culture becomes the scorecard, and you can measure it a bunch of different ways. What's your employee retention rate? How often are you getting referrals from your employees to bring in people that they know, right? Like all these different pieces. Do you have a really high level quality output? And that could be for a product based business, from a manufacturer standpoint, or service levels, right? This stuff is universally applied. So it can certainly be talked about from a professional service standpoint. Do you have customer churn? That's another metric we can take a look at to understand, like, what is the culture here? Do people feel on the team, do they feel empowered to resolve issues? Or is there an entire chain of command that they have to, get signed off on to be able to, take care of a problem that a customer is bringing to them? So, I think people get confused a lot of times that they're trying to build a culture. You can't build a culture. You do all of these other pieces, and the culture is the result. And if you've done all of the other pieces well, then you have a tremendous culture. You have people that will follow along. You have people that will contribute equally, and they will feel rewarded in that process. That is, what we're out there seeking. And that was a really hard lesson learned for me, kind of back to growing up in a family owned business. It wasn't always like that when I was kind of growing up, I'll say. From the kind of more empathetic, collaborative leadership approach.
Yeah.
And so, that was a piece that took me a long time to figure out. I'm thankful that I did. And, the kind of forward progress and the shrunken timeline, that speaks volumes to having to learn that lesson. So again, I share this stuff because of the poor decisions I made along the way,
Right.
not because I read it in a book somewhere. This is a lived practical experience that I share this stuff from.
Yeah, Dave has the scars to show what he's been through. So talk to me a little bit about who who's an ideal client, I guess, because my audience is pretty broad. But
Sure.
then what are they? What's going on inside of them? I guess not necessarily what's keeping them up at night, but I mean, every day when they go to work, they're thinking about something that's going on that's just not right. What are some of those indicators that they just might want to reach out and have a conversation with you? So those two things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, primarily we're working with small to medium sized manufacturers. That's our primary audience, our primary client base. But as I mentioned, Michael, this stuff is universally applied, and I've certainly done work outside of the manufacturing space. Of worked with groups of realtors and groups with lawyers and skilled trades folks and construction folks. So it's again, the concepts are universally applied in terms of business. And as far as what people are often feeling or kind of seeing from that symptom perspective, I use the kind of Groundhog Day. If you ever saw that movie with Bill Murray,
Time ago, yeah.
that's kind of what life feels like for a lot of my clients. They kind of they already know before they've gotten ready for the day what kind of day they're about to have, because it's just like yesterday. They go in, they're fighting fires constantly, they're being pulled in a million directions. They've got too many, irons in the fire, not enough time. And then as you kind of start to zoom out, right, they're seeing things like customer complaints going up. They're seeing things like profitability being low. They're seeing things like efficiency and utilization not being where they'd like it to be, right? So lead times get extended, all these different pieces. That's typically when people reach out and have a conversation. And I put a ton of free content out there, so there's lots of different ways that you can learn and interact. And at the end of the day, my goal is to kind of share my hard learned lessons to
Yeah.
help you avoid them. And not necessarily because, oh hey, I want to get a paid engagement. That's why I put so much stuff out there that you can find for free. I've got a weekly newsletter. I've got a podcast you can listen to. So there's an endless number of choices to interact and to start to get your hands around some of these issues you're dealing with.
Yeah, and that's good. And we want to later tell people how to get a hold of all those things, because that's
Sure.
really, really important. What I've also found though is as entrepreneurs, we tend to be really good at what we do, right? And we're not really skilled many times at running the business as it gets larger and thinking about all these things. And what happens is that a business owner gets involved with this and they start seeing their business crumble, right? And they're not sure what's going on, and it starts causing that Groundhog Day effect. And I think, not that going out and reading your blogs is wrong, or listening to your podcast. I would highly encourage that, but I want to encourage my audience not to waste a ton of time thinking you're going to get a PhD in how to fix things by reading everything Dave puts out. I want you to read him, listen to his podcast, but I want you to call him and have a conversation
Yeah.
and start saying, Dave, because I know that Dave can fix it in about a tenth of the time that it's going to take you and your team. It just, because he has the runway and the experience. Is that a fair statement, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so many nuances to the issues, right? So just because yeah, I'll say it a different way, right? There's a bunch of different frameworks that you can follow if you want to talk about continuous improvement and lean manufacturing. There's no shortage of, tools and whether we're talking technology or something a bit more manual. But at the end of the day, the difference maker is the practical application. So I hear from a lot of people that maybe are on, trying to implement EOS, let's say, or eMyth or something like that. And the conversation generally goes something like, I just read eMyth. I'm really excited about systemizing my business. I understand it from a 10,000-foot view,
Yeah.
but where do I start? I don't know what they
Right.
really mean by creating and optimizing a system.
Right.
Right. So you could read all you'd like, you can, listen to all of the things, but it's the practical application that will always make the difference. And, that comes through experience.
It really does.
That's it.
Yeah, and that experience is really geared with having the conversation and having Dave on your team to go, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what I learned. Here's what I know about the eMyth. Here's what I kind of want to do, Dave. How do I do that? And then Dave, with his experience, goes, okay, well, step one would be this. Okay, we're going to take 7 steps, but step one is going to be this. And here's how it relates to that thing you learned in the eMyth. Here's how it applies to your business. And so you're that, dare I say, a translator of information at times, but you're also there to be the guide and the director and say, oh, by the way, before we pull that lever, we need to come over here and do these things because X, Y, and Z. And that business owners should be sitting over there going, oh, praise God for Dave, right? Because it takes the load off of them. Not only do they not have to
Yeah.
figure it all out themselves, it just takes the load off of them so that they can drive into work and go, you know what? It's going to be a pretty good day today. That's where we're going, and the culture is working, and people walk in and you can actually say hi to your employees and they say hi back and all of that, because that's the end result. As you said, the culture is the result. It's the byproduct of doing these things right. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling, if you're driving into work every day going, hey, it's going to be one of those days, right? Reach out and call Dave. Just call, sign up for his email, listen to his podcast, but schedule the call. Because that's just not worth it. That's not the entrepreneurial dream that we've all signed up for.
Yeah.
It just happens to come with it, right?
Yeah, it does.
And it's just part of the deal at one level. And through adversity, we grow, we get stronger, and in your clients, I'm sure, learn, and they're stronger, better people once they've gone through working with you to go, wow, I have more capabilities now. I have more confidence now. I can do this. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And then they can impact their team and their culture and their people. And it's
Yeah.
really, it's an upward spiral of success instead of that downward spiral to woe is me and we're all doomed, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, bringing people along is it's all part of the fun and part of the journey. And the only other thing I would add to what you were saying is, a lot of times we get in our mind that we want to pull a lever on something very specific, right? And that's fine. But again, through that learned practical experience, what I find is sometimes there may be another piece of that we can pull first, or that we could prioritize that'll give us a bigger impact. And a lot of times what that'll do then is free up cash or free up another resource that we weren't even thinking about, that then allows us to compound, right? And turn that wheel faster. So you start to see a lot more progress and a lot quicker. So it's kind of, let's focus on the right things. Doesn't mean we're not going to focus on that. Let's focus on the right things and in the right order. And that's typically what, moves the needle the quickest.
Absolutely. Well, if your needle needs moved, Dave's the guy. He can help you out. Tell us, Dave, how does somebody get a hold of you? How do they find your newsletter, your podcast, things of that nature? What are the best places to find you?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. And then beyond that, I'm also on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, and then on my website. Those are probably the three best places for you to find me. You can Google my name, and you'll come across one of those. I'm pretty sure of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to make sure that we have those in the show notes as well. Definitely the LinkedIn and website. But Dave Chrysler, the Chrysler Club. .com is his website, but you can just reach out to him. You can tell by this podcast, the guy's got a lot of experience. He can help you with those points of transition and better efficiencies to drive more profit, better culture, and to really overall enjoy your life more, have a better life because your business isn't weighing you down. Because whatever you're dealing with, there really is a fix to it. It's a process, and you need somebody like Dave alongside of you. Just say, okay, here's where I failed. Learn from my mistake. Here's what we're going to do, and this is why. And he'll just guide you down the pathway. So, Dave, man, thanks. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for taking all of your experiences, your scars, and all of that, and putting them to good use to help entrepreneurs, business owners, manufacturers really learn how to make their world a better place and serve more people. And thanks for being my guest today, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's a ton of fun, and appreciate it.